The Japanese automotive industry is rapidly plunging into a crisis, already described as the largest in the past 6 decades. What for many years was a symbol of the Japanese economic miracle, flawless Toyota engines, Honda engineering platforms, the legendary reliability of Nissan, the refined precision of Mazda, and the technological meticulousness of Subaru, has now come under the blows of several global forces at once. New American tariffs introduced by the administration of Donald Trump became the first push that knocked the Japanese auto industry out of balance. According to Nikkei Asia, the increase in duties on Japanese cars destabilized not only export flows, but the entire production structure, forcing companies to revise plans, reduce model lineups, and shift to strict austerity. Financial Times writes that these tariffs effectively tore apart the trade system built over decades between the United States and Japan, in which the American market played the role of the main consumer of Japanese cars. Now, logistics, supplies, and production chains have been thrown into chaos, and no diplomatic effort has been able to restore previous stability. But external tariffs are only part of the problem. The domestic market in Japan itself is experiencing a deep and long-term decline. The population is aging, young people are increasingly uninterested in buying cars, the level of urbanization is rising, and in major cities, owning a personal vehicle is becoming unnecessary. According to the Ministry of Economy of Japan, the number of new car buyers inside the country has fallen to the level of the late 1980s. Asahi Shimbun emphasizes that this is not a temporary dip, but a structural shift in consumer behavior that can no longer be reversed. As a result, Japanese auto giants find themselves in a situation where the external market is closing due to tariff pressure, and the internal market is shrinking, leaving them without support. And at this very moment when the Japanese industry is split between external and internal blows, China appears on the horizon, calm, confident, methodical, and incredibly prepared, having watched Japanese weakness for years. South China Morning Post reports that Beijing has long studied the vulnerabilities of the Japanese model built on export dependence and a weak domestic battery industry. China, by contrast, has built a colossal industrial ecosystem covering everything from rare earth element extraction to lithium-ion battery production, electric platforms, autonomous system development, logistics, supply chains, and even raw material recycling. According to The Economist, China has taken full control of most of the global supply chain for electric vehicles, which means that any country that has failed to build its own battery infrastructure will inevitably fall into dependence on Beijing. In this context, the Japanese situation becomes extremely dangerous. Bloomberg writes that China sees the crisis in Japan as a historical window of opportunity to strengthen its influence in the Asia-Pacific region and gain access to Japanese technologies, production capacities, and logistics networks. This is not about the direct purchase of brands. China acts more elegantly. Reuters reports that Chinese state structures have already begun expanding their presence in Southeast Asia, where numerous Japanese factories are located. Chinese partners are offering Japanese companies joint production, technological alliances, and operational partnerships. But Japanese experts warned that this is a path toward the gradual transfer of control to Chinese technological groups. NHK notes that the Japanese government is concerned about the sharp rise in Chinese activity around automotive industrial zones in Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia, where key assembly lines of Toyota, Honda, and Nissan are located. If China takes these regional hubs under its influence, it will be able to control most of the production cycle of Japanese companies, from component supplies to final assembly. According to analysts from the East Asia Economic Forum, this will become the first step toward the structural absorption of the Japanese automotive industry. The Economist writes that China is moving according to a three-stage scenario. First, it creates dependence on its battery technologies. Then, it offers assistance in building joint platforms. And finally, it strengthens its influence in production centers outside Japan. In this way, Japanese auto giants keep their brands and signs, but actual technological control shifts to Beijing. Experts call this strategy absorption without purchase, a slow but relentless transfer of power. Internal documents from government meetings published by Japan Times show how seriously Tokyo assesses the threat. They state that China is capable of seizing control of the Japanese automotive industry without acquiring a single Japanese plant on Japanese territory. It is enough to control logistics, supplies, regional production, and battery centers. And all this is happening against the backdrop of a dramatic technological gap. Chinese companies such as BYD, CATL, SAIC, and JI already dominate the production of batteries, electric platforms, and low-cost electric vehicles. Meanwhile, Japanese companies, according to Nikkei, continue to bet on hybrids and hydrogen, technologies that are important but far less competitive in a world of global electrification. Japan's technological lag is becoming obvious. China releases new electric models every 8 to 12 months, while Japanese companies require 3 to 5 years to update a model lineup. Beijing is using this gap as efficiently as possible. In official Chinese media, including Xinhua and Global Times, articles are already appearing stating that the era of Japanese automotive leadership has come to an end, and that China is ready to assume the role of the new technological center of Asia. These statements sound not like propaganda, but like the confidence of a country that knows it possesses resources, infrastructure, and strategic vision unavailable to its competitors. And while Japan is trying to stabilize the situation, China is taking its next step. According to South China Morning Post, Chinese state funds are already considering the creation of joint technological hubs into which Japanese companies will be forced to integrate for access to batteries and components. Analysts call this economic gravity, which over time will evolve into actual control over the industry. But behind the scenes of this crisis, something is unfolding that experts call a quiet shift in centers of power. According to analysts from Nikkei and the East Asia Economic Forum, China is no longer merely observing the weakening of the Japanese automotive industry. It is systematically reshaping the regional industrial map so that Beijing becomes the final coordinator of all key technological processes in Asia. Over the past 2 years, China has increased pressure on supply chains for rare earth elements, without which modern electric motors are impossible, accelerated the creation of new industrial clusters for battery production in Chongqing, Guangdong, and Anhui, and begun actively investing in major Southeast Asian logistics hubs through which nearly 40% of Japanese automotive components pass. Add to this the growing control of Chinese corporations over Asian ports, shipping lines, microchip suppliers, and power electronics factories, and it becomes clear that Beijing is building a network in which Japanese companies inevitably become dependent on Chinese decisions. Today, no one in Tokyo asks whether China will try to take control of the Japanese automotive industry. The question is different: when exactly this will happen and in what form? With each passing month, the risk increases that Japanese auto giants will find themselves in a position where their own technologies, production, and even strategic future depend on decisions made in Beijing. And if this trend continues, the world will witness an unprecedented event. A country that for decades symbolized global automobile manufacturing will gradually fall under the strategic influence of its most powerful neighbor. And then it will become clear that this was not merely a crisis of the Japanese automotive industry. It was a quiet but historic shift of an era in which the old leader lost control and the new one rose to the top of the global industrial and technological hierarchy.